him on the highway with a suitcase and a note, and he never left it. The sun was blinding over Los Angeles, pouring down on the pavement like it was trying to burn the city clean. I was just past Fairfax, heading south, when I saw the suitcase. Old, brown, torn, dumped like everything else people don't want to deal with. But then I saw movement. A small figure curled against it, unmoving except for the rise and fall of his tiny chest, and something white wrapped around his head. I pulled over so fast I nearly scraped the curb, jumped out, ran toward him. It was a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 4 months old, his body pressed against the suitcase like he belonged to it. But his eyes, they were covered. Someone had tied a strip of white cloth around his head, covering his eyes completely. He couldn't see where he was. He didn't even know the cars were flying past, inches away, and still, he didn't move. I froze. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. His breathing was shallow. His paws were scraped raw. His nose twitched in the direction of my boots, but he didn't react beyond that. He just stayed there, silent, guarding the suitcase, or waiting for someone who was never coming back. There was a note duct taped to the top of the suitcase, scrawled in thick black marker, "Free dog. Too loud." My throat closed up. I crouched slowly, heart pounding. "Hey," I said, barely above a whisper. "Hey, buddy." The puppy flinched, then tilted his head trying to hear. He couldn't see me, but he was still listening. I reached out. My fingers brushed the edge of the blindfold. It was an old white t-shirt tied so tightly it left marks behind his ears. Who does that to a puppy? He didn't resist, didn't whine. Just breathed, shallow and fast. I slid the cloth off his eyes. He blinked against the sunlight, confused, like it hurt. His eyes were deep brown, glazed, not quite focused. But then he looked at me, just for a second, and laid his head right back down against the suitcase. There was nothing else in it, just a torn blanket, some crumpled paper, a cracked plastic bowl with nothing inside. He hadn't moved from that spot. He was waiting. "My name's Michael. I'm a volunteer now, but I used to drive this road for a living. I've seen all kinds of things dumped on California's streets, but I had never seen something wait for its own heartbreak." I sat down next to him. Let the sun burn my back, let the cars fly past. He didn't look away, he just stared into the heat. I don't know how long he'd been there, but the question burned in my head. Would he come with me? Or was he going to die beside the suitcase they left him in? He didn't move when I picked up the suitcase. That was the only way he'd come. I tried calling him, coaxing him with soft words, even setting a bottle of water nearby. But the moment I stepped away without the suitcase, he just curled tighter around it, like it was the last thing in the world that meant something. So I grabbed the handle, cracked, sticky with tape, and slung it over my shoulder. That's when he stood. He wobbled at first. His back legs trembled, and one paw dragged slightly behind the others, but he stood and followed. No sound, no bark, no hesitation. The blindfold I'd pulled from his eyes was still in my pocket, knotted and stained. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away yet. It felt like part of the story, like something I had to carry until he didn't need me to anymore. I led him to the van, opened the side door. He looked up at the step like it was a mountain. Then he jumped, landed hard, almost fell. But he stayed upright, climbed in, sat beside the suitcase, and laid his head against it again. That was when I really saw the scars, small ones along his muzzle, barely healed scratches on his ears, patches where the fur was thinner, not from mange, just from pressure. Pressure against something hard, maybe the inside of that suitcase. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the traffic, unsure of where to go. A dog like this wouldn't last in the city pound. And I wasn't ready for another dog, not after Max. But something about him, that German Shepherd puppy with no name, no sound, no tears, told me he didn't need a forever home. He needed someone to believe he was worth saving. I drove him to a small rescue shelter I used to volunteer at back before everything fell apart. They'd had space last I heard. Maybe they still did. When I opened the door, he didn't budge until I picked up the suitcase again. And only then did he follow me inside, one paw dragging, eyes half closed but heart still hanging on. "Does he have a name?" the intake woman asked, kneeling down to meet his eyes. I shook my head. "He does now," she whispered. "Welcome home, Toby." He blinked, and for the first time, just barely, his tail moved. Once. They left him blind and silent on a burning roadside. and still he waited. Toby didn't cry, didn't protest, he just clung to that suitcase like it was a memory that might protect him. And the more I looked at him, the more something inside me twisted. Because someone did this. Someone looked into this German Shepherd puppy's eyes and made a choice. To tie a blindfold over his face, to drop him like trash on hot pavement, and to write a joke of a message like, "Free dog." Too loud, like he was broken, like he deserved it. Like his life didn't matter. I'm not a violent man, never have been. But in that moment I wanted to scream into the sky. How many others like him are out there, dumped when they become inconvenient? Too loud, too big, too alive. Toby was panting in the shelter room now. Not whining, not barking, just panting. That kind of hollow, empty breathing that happens when a dog's not sure what he's allowed to feel. The staff did a quick assessment, said he wasn't microchipped. No records, no one looking. Of course not. They'd left him with a suitcase and blindfolded him. They wanted him forgotten. One of the vets brought over a dish of soft food. Toby didn't touch it. He just sniffed the air, then looked toward the sound. He hadn't eaten in God knows how long, and he still didn't trust it. I sat cross-legged on the floor, suitcase beside me, and whispered, "It's okay now." He didn't look at me. But he lay down with his back against my leg, and something cracked open in me. The space that had closed after Max died. My own German Shepherd, my shadow for 10 years, the space I swore no dog would ever fill again. It ached, it burned, but it was open. "Some people don't deserve dogs," I muttered. "But you didn't deserve this." Toby shifted. Then, slowly, like it hurt to move, he reached out with one paw and touched the suitcase. Not the food, not me. The suitcase, like a part of him still believed it meant something. I couldn't let that be the only thing he trusted in this world. Not after what they did. Not after they left him blind, silent, and alone in the middle of Los Angeles. He needed to know, not all people walk away. Some of us stay. He stayed curled up against that suitcase for hours, even after the staff gave him a soft bed and a quiet corner in the intake room. They left the light off. They brought him a blanket that smelled like lavender, but he didn't move. He just pressed his side into that ragged brown case like it still had something inside it he needed to protect. And I couldn't leave either. I sat there, on the cold tile floor, watching this German Shepherd puppy breathe. Watching his chest rise and fall so slowly it scared me. I'd seen trauma before. I'd seen dogs flinch at loud noises, avoid touch, whimper in their sleep. But this was different. Toby wasn't hiding, he wasn't reacting. He was simply gone. Like someone had taken the light out of him and left behind just the shell. I asked the staff if he could stay overnight. They nodded, a little unsure. Puppies usually cry when left alone, not him. That night I didn't go home. I drove around the block 5 times, then came back. I had an old blanket in the van. Max used to love it. It smelled like cedar and thyme. I brought it in and placed it near the suitcase. Toby didn't react. But when I sat down beside it, leaned against the wall, and let out a long breath, I saw something. His tail twitched. Just once, the faintest flicker. It was nothing. It was everything. I whispered to him. I don't even remember what I said. Something about the road. About how some people break what they don't understand. About how some dogs, no matter what, still try to love the world anyway. He didn't move, but he was listening. The next morning they gave him a real exam. He had bruises along his ribs, light ones, likely from being confined. His paw pads were raw from heat, and the vet said something that sent ice through my veins. His vision is fine, but he's not blinking like a normal pup. It's like he trained himself not to look. He learned not to look. Who teaches a puppy that? I stepped outside after that and sat on the curb with my hands clenched. There's a kind of quiet rage that builds when you see something innocent damaged so thoroughly and so deliberately. Not by nature, not by accident, but by choice. Someone chose this. And Toby, he chose to survive anyway. He deserved more than a cot in the corner and a file with no name. He deserved someone who would stay. And whether I was ready or not, I was already his. He didn't touch the food the first night, not the second either. But on the 3rd morning, I walked into the shelter just after sunrise, and something had changed. The blanket I'd left, Max's old cedar-stained one, was pulled halfway across the floor. And Toby, the German Shepherd puppy who wouldn't move or speak or blink, was lying on it. Not the cold tiles, not the corner, the blanket. His eyes met mine for a brief second. He didn't flinch. That was the first crack in the wall. I sat down beside him, suitcase in my lap, and started to unwrap the small rubber toy I found in Max's box the night before. A chewed-up yellow duck, squeaker long gone, still smelled faintly of something warm. I placed it near him. He sniffed it. Didn't move. But his nose twitched. His paw shifted, just slightly, toward it. "Toby," I whispered. "You can take it. It's yours now." He didn't, but an hour later when I stepped out and came back, it was between his paws, held like a secret. That same day a family came into the shelter, young parents, tired eyes, a little girl clutching a pink notebook against her chest. She was maybe 7. Hair in loose braids, pale cheeks. And she didn't speak. Emma. The shelter staff told me quietly that she hadn't said a word in 11 months. Car accident. Trauma. Anxiety so severe that even school had become impossible. They were thinking of adopting, not urgently, just seeing if the right dog would reach her. I didn't say anything. But Toby lifted his head when she walked past. Not fast, not alert, just a small, slow raise. His eyes locked onto hers. Emma stopped, stared back. Neither moved, no barking, no jumping, no wagging. Just two quiet beings who had both been silenced by people who should have protected them. And then, for the first time since I'd met him, Toby did something that shattered me. He stood up, walked to her, not to her parents, and laid his head gently against her thigh. She didn't back away. She dropped her notebook, sat on the floor, and placed both her hands on his face. He didn't blink, didn't tremble. He leaned into her palms like they were the first safe place he'd known. And I couldn't breathe. The shelter staff looked at me. One of them whispered, "I think he chose." But in that moment I knew. They had both chosen each other. The question was, could they both learn to heal together? The next day she came back. Same time, same little pink notebook clutched tight to her chest. Emma didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't even glance at the other dogs. She walked straight through the door, scanned the room, and stopped when she saw him. Toby was curled up in his usual corner, head on the suitcase, duck toy between his paws. But when he saw her, he stood. No hesitation, his tail didn't wag, not yet. But he walked to her with quiet purpose, like he was answering a question only the two of them could hear. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor before he even reached her. She set her notebook down, opened it. Page after page, drawings, dogs, roads, suitcases, a little girl holding hands with a brown dog. I watched from a distance as Toby gently pressed his nose to one of the pages. She turned it, showed him the next. And then the next. He didn't look away. Not once. It was the longest he'd stayed away from that suitcase since the day I brought him in, and I realized something that made my chest ache. He wasn't choosing the suitcase anymore. He was choosing her. I sat with the shelter director that afternoon. They told me Emma's therapist believed that exposure to dogs could help with emotional release. That Emma had stopped speaking after the crash that killed her older brother, and no form of therapy had broken through. Until now, until this silent German Shepherd puppy who had once forgotten how to see. "He hears her," I said quietly. The director nodded, and she hears him. That night, Emma's family asked if they could try fostering Toby, just for a weekend, to see if the connection would hold outside these walls. I said yes. I packed the suitcase, the blanket, the duck toy. As we walked to the car, Toby looked back at me once, just once. And I didn't see fear. I saw something close to trust. Maybe it was too early, maybe he wasn't ready, maybe she wasn't either. But as the door closed and he climbed in beside her, something told me they had already started saving each other. The only question left was, would the world let it last? The update came the very next morning, a short text from the shelter manager. "You need to come in, something happened." My heart sank. I rushed over, half expecting bad news. Maybe Toby had panicked, maybe he'd shut down again, maybe it had all been too much. But when I arrived, they were already waiting for me. Emma, her mom, her dad, and Toby, sitting outside on the grass, and Emma was laughing, not just smiling. Laughing, full, soft, breathy bursts of joy, like something was shaking loose inside her. Toby sat in front of her, licking her fingers, his duck toy in her lap. His ears perked forward, eyes brighter than I'd ever seen. Emma's mom stood and hugged me. Hard. She spoke. She whispered. She said his name. Just looked at him and said Toby, clear as anything, no hesitation. I looked down at him, this German Shepherd puppy who had once laid blindfolded beside a suitcase on the side of a highway, now lifting a broken little girl back into the world. And I had to look away because my eyes were burning. They told me more. That night, when Toby came home with them, he wouldn't sleep anywhere but beside her bed. He lay on the rug, head on her slippers, watching her, and in the dark, she had whispered it. Toby. Her first word in almost a year. I knelt down next to him, ran a hand along his back. You really are something else, huh? He leaned into my touch, his tail wagged, just once, steady, confident. Emma opened her notebook and handed it to me. There was a new drawing on the first page. Her, holding Toby's leash, standing in the sunlight. And in the sky above them, in big block letters, she'd written one word, safe. I didn't know what to say, I just nodded, my throat tight. That day the director started the paperwork. Emma's family wasn't just fostering anymore. They were adopting him. And me? I wasn't losing Toby, I was watching him become who he was always meant to be. But I couldn't help but wonder, after all the pain, could he ever believe this was forever? The first night Toby spent in his new home, he didn't sleep. Emma's parents said he paced between rooms, checking doors, sniffing corners, circling back to her bedside like he was making sure she hadn't disappeared. Again and again. But he never barked, never cried, just watched, like the silence was his way of guarding what he'd finally been given. By the second night, he curled up at the foot of Emma's bed. By the third, his head rested on her lap, as she read out loud, slowly, stumbling over words but reading. Toby didn't understand the stories, but he listened, eyes soft, ears forward, tail sweeping the floor in lazy arcs, like every syllable pulled him further from the roadside, from the blindfold, from the suitcase. The vet checked him again that week. His weight was up, cuts healed, no infection. But what stood out most wasn't medical, it was behavioral. He's learning to look people in the eye again, she said. You don't fake that. The shelter staff invited me to visit a few days later. I didn't know what to expect, but the moment I walked into their backyard, Toby sprinted to me, full speed, tail wagging, ears perked, like he'd been waiting. He didn't stop at my feet. He launched his front paws into my lap and licked my chin, then darted back to Emma as if to say, Don't worry, I'll come back. She laughed and nodded like she understood. Then she walked to me, holding something in both hands. It was the suitcase, taped up, scuffed, now covered in hand-drawn stickers, stars, hearts, paw prints, and on the side she'd written one word in pink paint. Home. My knees nearly gave out. I knelt down, pressing a hand to the warm, faded canvas. He sleeps next to it, she whispered. That was her second sentence to me, just 4 words, and they hit harder than any speech. He didn't sleep beside it because he missed the pain. He slept there because it reminded him that someone had come back for him. Because now it didn't mean abandonment. It meant rescue. Toby didn't need the suitcase anymore. But he'd claimed it, not as a wound, as a reminder, that the boy they left behind was no longer alone. Not ever again. It was a Saturday when I saw them again. Emma and Toby were walking together through the park near my old delivery route. No leash, no fear, just 2 shadows side by side in the golden morning light. Toby had changed. The way he moved, ears up, steps light, eyes alert, was nothing like the broken German Shepherd puppy I had found pressed against that suitcase weeks ago. He didn't look over his shoulder anymore. He didn't freeze when cars passed. He didn't sleep with his back to the wall. He was just living. Emma spotted me first. She waved. Toby trotted over like he'd known I'd be there. He pressed his head into my chest, tail swaying, breath calm. Then he turned around and ran back to her, circling her feet until she laughed. I sat on the bench nearby while her parents caught up. Emma sat on the grass, pulled out her notebook, and began drawing. Toby laid down beside her, resting his chin on her knee. Her dad turned to me and said, He's with her every minute. School, therapy, grocery runs. He even waits by the bathroom door, won't let her out of his sight. He knows what it's like to be left behind, I said, and he's never going to let it happen to her. Later that day, they invited me to their home. Toby showed me around like it was his job, room by room, tail wagging, checking that I followed. There was a corner by the window where the old suitcase sat, now lined with a plush bed and a pillow. Toby didn't sleep in it anymore, but he still touched it with his nose every morning. I noticed something new on the wall, a framed photo of Emma and Toby, curled up together, eyes closed, forehead to fur. Underneath it, in Emma's handwriting, we were both waiting, but now we're home. I had to step outside for air, because grief has strange timing. It doesn't warn you when it shows up. And sometimes it mixes with joy so tightly, you don't know if you're crying from pain or gratitude. Max, my old shepherd, would have loved Toby. He had that same fire, that same softness hidden behind silent eyes. I looked back through the window and saw Emma reading out loud, her voice clear and steady. Toby didn't move, he just listened. Because now he had everything he once waited for, not in the suitcase, not by the road, but in her voice. It happened on a Thursday, just after sunset. A thunderstorm rolled in fast over the hills behind their neighborhood, wind howling, skies cracked open with distant rumbles. Emma's mom told me later she had just stepped into the kitchen for 5 minutes. When she came back, the door was ajar. And Toby was gone. No barking, no scratching, just gone. The storm hit hard. Rain slammed the streets, trees shook, the sky flickered in bursts of white. I got the call while I was loading crates behind the shelter. Emma's voice, trembling, barely above a whisper, broke through the line. "He's not here." I dropped everything and ran to my truck. By the time I reached the neighborhood, people were already out in raincoats, flashlights sweeping driveways and backyards. Shelter staff had posted on every local group. Police knew. Everyone knew. Because this wasn't just a lost dog, this was Toby, the puppy who waited in silence. The one who found the one person he could trust. And now he was out there again, in the dark, in the rain, maybe thinking he'd been left again. I walked for hours, calling his name, whistling, checking under cars, behind dumpsters, beneath porches, but the streets gave no answers, until I saw it. Out near the edge of the neighborhood where the houses thinned and the freeway noise came back, there was an old concrete lot, empty, abandoned. And in the far corner, next to a pile of broken wooden trash, something small and dark was curled under a bent signpost. I knew it was him before I even got close. Toby, soaked through, covered in mud, lying next to something. A suitcase, not his. Just another old discarded bag someone had dumped on the side of the road. But Toby had found it, laid beside it, like the past had pulled him back, like some part of him still believed this was where he belonged. I dropped to my knees beside him. "Toby," I whispered, choking on the sound of my own voice. "No, buddy, not again. You're not that dog anymore." He looked up at me and something inside him broke. He didn't bark, didn't whimper. He just crawled into my lap, one paw at a time, shivering, pressing his soaked body against my chest like he was trying to disappear into me. I wrapped my arms around him, held him tight. "I should have known," I whispered. "You weren't running away. You were running back. To make sure it wasn't still waiting for you." He needed to see it, needed to return to the place where his pain began. But this time, he didn't wait alone. This time, someone came for him. And maybe that's what he was really testing. Not if the world could be trusted, but if we would show up when it mattered most. I carried him to the truck. He didn't look back. The house was quiet when I brought him back. Emma was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, clutching his duck toy so tightly her knuckles were white. Her parents stood on either side of her, eyes red, silent. The moment I opened the door, she dropped the toy and ran. "Toby." Her voice broke through the silence like sunlight cutting fog. He perked up in my arms, ears twitching. I lowered him to the floor, and he ran to her. Not limped, not walked. Ran. Straight into her arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck and sobbed into his fur. He licked her face, whining for the first time in weeks, short, breathy cries that sounded more like relief than fear. I stood in the doorway, dripping wet, watching them fall back onto the rug together, girl and dog, broken things stitched back into place. Her mother touched my arm gently. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing him back." "He came back on his own," I said. "I just helped him finish the journey." Later that night, Emma brought the suitcase out of the corner again, but she didn't lay it beside him this time. She opened it. Inside, she placed a drawing she'd made of her and Toby sitting under a big tree with a bright sun overhead. Then she zipped the suitcase shut, and Toby, watching her the whole time, stood up, walked over, and laid down next to it. Not out of fear, but as if to say, "It's closed now. It's over." That was the last night he ever touched it. A week later, the family officially completed the adoption. Toby was now a registered emotional support dog. and Emma had begun speaking in full sentences again. Slowly, carefully, but consistently. At her therapist's office, she told them something that stopped the room. I talked because he stayed, and because someone stayed for him. Toby didn't need saving anymore. Now, he was the one who saved. And for the first time since I met him, he could finally rest. Not beside a suitcase, not on cold tile, not on the side of a highway, but in a place where the only thing he ever wanted had finally come true. A place where someone stayed. Sometimes the ones left behind are the ones who teach us what love really means. Toby was more than a rescue, he was more than a victim of someone's cruelty. He was proof that even after the deepest still choose to trust again. He waited on the side of that road, blindfolded and alone, not because he didn't know he was abandoned, but because he still believed someone might come back. And in a way, someone did. Emma, her family. All of us who refused to look away. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. So if Toby